Community tab and Twitter. I am working on a couple projects right now, and I thought I'd kind of just open the door to my creative process a little bit because just seemed like a good idea. When I talked about German elections at the end of last year, I gave you guys a little bit of an insight into what I was thinking, and it actually helped me to write a piece a little bit more fluently about a week after that. And so one of the books I'm looking at, I'm just about done with right now, is called The Berlin Airlift. It's by John and Ann Tussa, or Tussa. I've only read the name, so I don't actually know how it's pronounced when spoken out loud. And this one was actually published in 1988, before the reunification of Germany. So it didn't have access to some of the Soviet records that books by like Andrei Cherny have, which is a great. I finished that one first actually, and it was just a wonderful piece of creative nonfiction about the Berlin Airlift. And I've got a couple other books that I've read, and if I'm being perfectly honest, the authors' names have already slipped my mind, but there's a lot of really good writing about the Berlin Airlift, and I wouldn't say that the subject is exhausted, but the writing about it is plentiful. And so I've been trying myself to think about how I'd like to approach the topic for the video next month. Now, if you've gotten this far in the video, you probably already know what the Berlin Airlift is. If not, it was a moment in time during the Cold War, right at the beginning of the Cold War, when in Berlin specifically, where the four Allied forces were governing in theory as co-equals, the Soviet Union, the French, the British, and the Americans. Berlin lay deep into the Soviet territory, or the Soviet governing space of divided Germany. And in Berlin in particular, there was a four-piece Kommandatura, they called it, where the four Allied forces together tried to govern. And when that fell apart, and because of currency clashes within the city, the Soviet Union actually tried to blockade Berlin. This took place between June of 1948 and I believe May of 1949. And during this time, the British, the Americans, the French jointly used the open air corridors to fly supplies into the western part of Berlin and supply the city to the tune of somewhere between, depending on the month and the day, 2,000 to 5,000 tons of supplies of food, of petrol, medical supplies, even things like feminine hygiene products over the course of 12 months. They had varying degrees of success, but ultimately were able to overcome the blockade by air alone. And so it's been written on extensively, and normally when someone talks or writes about it, they talk about the people at the top, because the geopolitics are unbelievably fascinating. And I am not excluded from thinking that that's a logical place to start a narrative about the Berlin Airlift. A lot of people do. They talk about Yalta, the big three, Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt, hashing out the post-World World Order. They talk about Truman making the decision to stay in Berlin, and his huge, until 2016, probably the largest upset victory in a presidential election against Thomas Dewey in 1948. And they start there. The story begins with the geopolitics, sort of the aerial view of what's happening. Totally logical, and in fact, I've read in my research beautiful writing that starts in that way. The angle that I would like to go at for my video, my way of adding the conversation, so to speak, is I want to start on the ground level in Berlin, and I probably won't escape mentioning the powers that be. Of course, I'll have to mention names like Roosevelt, Truman, Stalin, Churchill, and the sort of generals like Clay, and I guess it's lieutenant colonels like Tunner, who participated in the airlift, of course. But I'd like to talk about the people of Berlin. I'd like to start and end the story with the actual people of Berlin, and almost tell the story from their eyes. And instead of saying, that there was a blockade, just saying that one day a Berliner might notice that the roads were cut off and not know all the nitty-gritty details of what was going on in the Kremlin or in the White House or in the Allied Kommandatura at that time. So that's the angle I'd like to take when I'm writing this story. So that's the big piece I'm working on for next month. I'm also working on something for you guys, that's going to hopefully come out this week or next, about Guernica, the piece by Picasso in Spain. I don't need to talk out that creatively too much because I'm already deep into writing, and will soon be into recording and editing. One thing that I do want to tell you guys, and this is not for any dramatic reason other than I don't have my camera with me at the moment because I'm traveling for personal reasons. So my next two videos will probably be audio only. I won't be showing my face. I'm okay with that. I think people have kind of gotten used to me being on camera, though. So when you see it, no need to think that I've changed my style. It's just for the next couple of videos, I've decided that for production's sake and because I literally just don't have my DSLR with me, that I will be just recording on my microphone, my Blue Yeti. So I'll have a nice audio quality to each of the videos, but I won't be actually on camera with my face. So I appreciate your subscription if you're subscribed to the channel or following me on Twitter, and I appreciate your engagement if you're watching this in the community tab. And I will see you guys in the comment section of my next published video. Later, guys.